So every play begins with a beginning and every play ends with the end. And some plays ends with a beginning in a reverse meaning. So we start now with a beginning. And I say hello to everybody for this meeting about 4 stages of the creative process. And we are here very much connected with Lisa Dalton.
Hello, I'm Lisa Dalton with the National Michael Chekhov Association, and we have a special guest from Israel here with us, and that is...
Hey, I'm Ophir, and I learned both with Lisa and Joerg, and I'm a certified teacher by the NMCA.
I'll also introduce very briefly my colleague, Charlie Bowles from the NMCA, who's the executive producer. Charlie, say hi.
Good morning to all from here in Dallas, where it is early morning, and where Lisa will tell you I would very unlikely be at this meeting this early. But she has a special pull on me.
Yeah, that's the power of Lisa. Yeah.
Take it away, Joerg.
So we go to the step 3 and 4, and the step 3 and 4 are very much connected with the steps 1 and 2, as Chekhov says by himself. They are not clearly to the right from each other. And so we have always some overlapping, or all these steps are in every other step also partwise included. And when we go to the 3rd and 4th step, that is, of course, a big question. Every director, every actor has found more or less her or his own way how to build up a play, how to bring it on the stage, and so on. And I just was reading in these days from one of the famous actors in the East German time of the Brecht theater. And he said that in the earlier times, even when Brecht was directing, he was involved in the play. They didn't start with a reading, with a full reading of the play. They started just with a rehearsal, with a physical, practical ways, and the director gave them some tasks. So this sounds a little bit different, and I think out of this extreme, one can understand that there are, of course, so many different ways, and different ways like inspired people. And so everybody will find something how he will do that, or she will develop the process. But on the other hand, it is, when you speak with someone or when you read that, it is interesting that it is always described that there is a kind of an inner structure, how the actors work, how the directors work. Some start immediately, some actors, by simply learning the text and doing that so that they can come to the rehearsal with the learned text, and then they go further. Others do some other research. And also, depending to our modern times, it is a question now in our time, how much time we have to rehearse together, and how much time it needs for the actor to work more or less alone, to prepare that you can bring it, your part, if you have a full part, to bring it in the 4 or 6 week rehearsal process. Even in the early times, as a Brecht ensemble, they worked around 3 months, more or less, on one play. And I think these times are not so much present anymore. So when we look to that and we go to the Chekhov's suggestion, so we can have an idea about the, I would say, the inner structure, the inner structure of that, what are the 4 stages of the creative process. And Chekhov names that first one the musical one, or as he says in the Russian version, this falling in love with a play and with a part. And the second is a more imaginative and a trying out process to go deeper in that. Then the third, it is kind of it starts to incorporate. It has to do with inspiration. Chekhov used this term inspiration for the 4th process. But I think in this way, this is of course just such an overlapping from the 3rd to the 4th. The 3rd has to do with inspiration. You bring it on the feet, you try the things out, and through the trying out, of course, you get new ideas. That's also an aim. You get inspired by that, what you now try out, how you bring your images to life. And the 4th step is at least the full incarnation of the idea. That's the intuition process. Then there is also described by Chekhov that there, in this way, the actor forgets himself because the character is just with him, and the character is playing on the actor in this meaning, this role. So there is a kind of intuition working, and Chekhov names it from the other side for the actor as the higher ego. The higher ego is leading this process so that the actor never get lost, and even the character is never alone. So these are, from my understanding, very interesting steps from the physical, from the clarifying, from the thinking to the imagination, first love and understanding, to the imagination, then to the inspiration, and then to the intuition. And at least in the performance, the audience perceive the intuition of all these creative workers on a play. So that's, let's say it's just again a starting moment, but we won't go to the 3rd moment, the 3rd process, what means it's now the real rehearsal in this way. People meet together, and director maybe is there, and then they start. How do you start, Lisa, in this moment?
For me, I find a great deal of overlap between 2 and 3, in as much as before rehearsal, I as the director and or I as the actor go through the process of reading many times and then allowing the images to percolate, and then bestowing the images on some in a multidimensional way on the paper and physicalizing that. And I take that all the way through using the system of analysis for finding the 9 central points that Michael Chekhov outlines very clearly in To the Actor, that with the 9 central events, along with understanding the processes of good and evil and how the points of conflict intersect in that structure, and creating harmonious groupings, sculptures, either for the life of my character as they go through this graph that is drawn. I create 9 psychological gestures, in effect, for those critical points, beginning with the end and working in reverse. And I also create a score of atmospheres. So I have that before I come into rehearsal, and I actually begin the rehearsal process not with reading the script. I begin with the score of atmospheres, guiding the entire cast through the score of atmospheres. And maybe in some cases, the cast has simply auditioned and they've never even gotten the script. That can happen. In the process of leading them through a score of atmospheres, they experience very deeply on this emotional and kinesthetic in the feeling life, and as an ensemble, the entire arc, dynamic arc of the whole story. And they will have gone through, in effect, they will have performed the entire play before they've sat down and read it. And that, and then I take them through creating the harmonious groupings of the very final moment, the fantasy that happens after the play ends. So maybe it's the wedding in some play that doesn't have the wed. It ends in the proposal. You know, everything's going to be fine. They're going to get married. So that final moment is the finale moment in your imagination, and working all the way backwards to what happened the moment before, what happened in existence that required the play to open on this day of all days, the pre-event. So with 9 main events that happen in the play, we have the pre-event and the post-event, which is 11, and we create from the post-event, working our way back to the pre-event, a sequence of harmonious groupings, or you could say ensemble psychological gestures for the whole play. So we've gone from the atmosphere into the 9 most important moments, and we've created in the imagination and memory field of the whole cast the ideal outcomes of the story and the conditions that exist that drive it forward. We've experienced the forces of good and evil and the victories and the defeats. And only after that do we then move in as an ensemble into the processes I spoke about last time, where we as a group talk about the themes, the ideas, come up with the forces of good and evil. And after that, then we will go into the actual blocking process. And the blocking process begins again at the final climax. And I block the final climax, and then the middle climax, and then the tertiary, the auxiliary climax, usually in the first act. And so we've got the 3 main climaxes, and I've got my curtain call. I actually block my curtain call on my first rehearsal rather than waiting to an hour before the show starts. And so we get that in the opening moment as the 5 main, most rehearsed, most critical sequences. And with that, we're again always looking at the feeling of the whole. So this sequence of harmonious groupings or psychological gestures that pinpoint each of the most significant moments of the play can actually be performed by the whole cast in a matter of 2, 3, 5 minutes, and can be used as a warm-up for every single rehearsal. And every person in the group, the stage manager, the technicians, the small minor characters, can be in the entire sequence, so that everyone in the group begins each day, each gathering, with a feeling of the whole, a feeling of the ensemble, the whole play. And And I will jump back that on my very first meeting, I do warm everyone up with some ball tossing, and I teach them the Japanese rock garden structures so that they can also create these harmonious groupings intuitively and instinctively. So with all of that in place, it's then time for the more individual character-driven work. It could be a week before I do a sit-down group reading.
Would you like to give me share screen option and I will show harmonious groupings if nobody familiar with it?
If that would be great. So there's an example, and you can see on the floor are these charts, and that's that graph from chapter 8 is the graph, and that graph is superimposed on the floor in that image, and so we have written down what the events are and what number they are, so that the ensemble can move from one to the other. There, thank you, Ophir. Now we'll turn it over to Joerg.
So that sounds very, very much structured, Lisa. So with my, how to say, I'm in this relationship, I'm very much lazy. Oh my God, I should come to learn from you something about such structuring. It is, of course, all depends from me. What is a play? How many actors do I have? And what rehearsal time we have, and so on. And very often it was in my work that I had to start just with point of zero with the people. And even when they had read the play at home one time, then we had to read that they know what we are going to. And my aim in this processes is to bring step by step a kind of a, how to say, an individual awareness, individual consciousness to the actors about the whole of the play. What is, of course, very much also possible through the, what I call this composition analysis, when we work it out, so that one after this preparation work with the imagination and with the different reading processes, we also, in my situations, we have also to work out the set and the costumes. We have no extra people for that. That's very seldom. So then it's a kind of a multiple, is that the word, the English word? A multiple process at the same time to bring everything a little bit a step forward and take it in from heaven through the first love of the play. And there is in the very beginning also with what the step one is, but it is also the rehearsal then with the people together. Can we describe a little bit this love? Can we draw it? Can we express it through movements? Can we maybe express it through a kind of a dancing or whatever, through other artistic aims? What is this love? And I come back also sometimes in the rehearsal process, step 3 then, also to some readings, and I developed different ways of reading a script so that one can explore also step by step the deeper meaning, or if you would like to say, the archetypal meaning of the words for that play, for that scene. So that leads them to create the images of the words, what also here is in this third step an important point, to find out the images for the text from the character's point of view. And of course, out of the overview, I like very much to have a kind of a run through the atmosphere with the help of psychological gestures. So for the atmosphere score, creating maybe in the first time very spontaneous some psychological gestures and play as a group composition with that. So that's a very nice thing. And I have to say I like very much, even in this early stage of the rehearsal process, not to go to the blocking or mise-en-scène itself, but go to the stage businesses. And I found for many reasons, that to go to the stage businesses, it can be a big help. So what we are doing, and there is something I have also stolen from Brecht in this way, and his way of theater. And we look for a small scene. I come later to that order of the scenes to speak about that. Let's say we have a scene, and we look first, what are the given physical actions? Okay, there are some plays, even in modern times, there are no physical actions given. Then there is another way also to move in the direction of the very simple psychological gestures. But let's stay with the physical actions on stage, they're working, how it works. So looking to what is the very last action of this scene? Do it. Not acting. Try to find out how you can imagine, and you have your imagination of the character. Can you see that? Imagine and then do it how the character is doing it, not acting. Give your body the movement for the character. That's the character as you imagine. And then we look to the very beginning of the action. Where does it in the space starts, and how does it start? And here's one important point for all that. I describe this action. Verbal. That means follow. If you look to me now and see that. So even naming the character always in the third person, never as I'm doing it, but I do it for the character. So what I speak out is what the character is doing. He lifts his right hand, goes with a hand to his nose and touches his nose, and starts to speak. Finished. And the first action, well, now I would have to say, speak his last words. Okay. And the beginning for the scene, okay, I do it in this way now. It's now just out of the blue, yeah. He comes to his chair, sits down, moves the chair, looks to his partner, and speaks. Done. Now I have the beginning and the end of the scene from the physical point of view. That's very, very simple. It can change every time. It's not to fix it. It's just to become aware how the character would do it. So now, then I do the beginning and the end together. I give you the example. He moves to his chair, and he takes the chair and pushes it to him, sits down and looks to his partner and speaks. He lifts his right hand and goes to his nose and speaks his last words. That's the scene. Now I am asking my inspiration, my imagination. What happens between these both moments? Do I know the scene? Do I know some actions? Of course, there is always something. And then I involve that and I do this other movement separately and then put it into that space between this both and so forth. And I don't speak the text. I always give an address that there is a text. And this gives a nice first also sense of that, what from the physical action side, the character is expressing, not only from the word side. Because my understanding of gestures and movements on stage is, how to say, is I would like to have them, they shall look natural, but I don't want to have them as naturalistic. I want that the actor knows that each movement, each gesture is something expressing what goes beyond the meaning of the words. And for that, it needs really to develop a great sense for that gestures. What we have in the psychophysical training, there is to train your body that you know each of your movements, that you always are aware of it. But now it comes that it is not only knowing the movements and the qualities of them. Now it comes also, there is always a meaning like the words have a meaning. Each body position, each gesture is meaningful. And the actor is creating it for the character, because out of the image of the character, one wants to express really a rich person in this way. So maybe that's too much of this, enough of the secrets now for that step. It's one bit, it's only one bit. There are some others, how to bring it into the space. And the aim of all that is that, how to say, that for the actor, the sphere around her, around him, the sphere of the understanding of the play, the sphere of the understanding and sensing of the character, step by step develops and can incarnate. So that in the end, the incorporation is not only one step and now we do the incorporation of the character. You know, that is not how it works. It is a step by step, it comes closer and closer, and then there are moments sometimes, even in the rehearsal process, which are amazingly inspired, amazingly filled with an intuition. But even in the third process, so that is the aim for many things. I play around with that before we, before we come then to the last rehearsals. And I think always it doesn't need that it is finished. I leave it very, very much open. All the things I leave open. Because I think as much as the space is filled, as easier it is in the end to say, okay, we do it in this way. It's interesting. In the Russian version of this chapter you have shown in this book here. Yeah. Chekhov, I didn't find it there. He says, the actors come to this third step of rehearsal, and they chose this part of their part they would like to try out now. And the director is asking questions to them. And he said, the director is not a despot, not a despot. He gives the actors a free will. They come what they would like to try out. And he is simply asking questions and also giving sometimes suggestions. So we can ask ourselves, how would it work in our times? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, if you have a good ensemble, I think it could work.
I will pick up on that idea about the director and actor relationship and responsibility and offering there. For me, I see generally there are two kinds of directors. There are directors who say, show me what you'd like to do. And there are directors who say, do this. I want it to go this way. And this happens both on stage and on camera. And my personal process is more of the first one in the beginning, where I want to create a field of opportunity for the actors to share with me what they have discovered and what their impulses are. And of course, I think as Joerg was suggesting, the success of this depends upon the individual development level and commitment level that the actors individually bring and what they're willing to work with as an ensemble. So the steps that Joerg outlined regarding having creating the physical business with a start point, the physical business with an end point, if one has ample time, Chekhov suggests that you improvise the whole middle section, or director comes in and actually builds up that beginning and that end point till you have a line of dialogue in the beginning, a line of dialogue in the end, and you repeatedly rehearse that middle section until it fleshes itself out. And if the actors know stage picture, know the dynamics of the stage that I was speaking about, for example, in the Rock Garden, they can pretty much construct the artistic form themselves. And then the director is able to help them become aware of the moments that are really working if they don't know it, and be able to help them see, let's keep that, let's build that until it comes into greater form. That process is particularly good if you're in a devising situation where you're, as an ensemble, creating a new piece, and it kind of evolves almost out of a sort of commedia dell'arte style, where you have a scenario, you have a sequence of businesses and activities that must happen for the play to continue. And once you hit those, you can do pretty much anything you want outside of that. For me, and it depends a lot, again, on the size of the cast and the style and the form of the material, whether or not, or how firmly I start to come in as a director. If it's comedy, I will, at a certain point, usually about halfway through the process, having gone through the basic structures of all the main events and done some run-throughs, that I will start becoming much more specific if I need to, because of the tempo, the rhythm, and the precision necessary for comedy, for example. And I will begin asking the actors to retain very specific points that are needed, comedy or drama, tragedy or farce, the specific points that are needed to keep the dynamic form moving forward. If they've been doing the harmonious grouping run through, what we call the synth analysis run through, if they've been doing that every day, they automatically are putting the strong emphases on those central points. And so not much has to happen. But I do become very dictatorial, I would say. And I do warn my casts at the beginning. I explain, because I feel the director is the parent, they're the captain of the ship, and their sense of leadership, their feeling of ease, their sense of form, their appreciation for the feeling of beauty of each of the individual, and for the chaotic processes that occur, will guide the entire atmosphere of the production as a whole. And for me, it is as important to maintain a work of art through rehearsal as it is to achieve this finale moment of performance. The humanity in the art is present throughout every single stage. And the actor who is aware of Michael Chekhov's principles then is invited to, on their own, practice their materials, whether it's the physical activities that you're being guided by your director, or the blocking if you're at that stage, so that you have at home looked at your source of materials, your tools, your grounds, as Mr. Chekhov called it, and Mr. Shanoff referred to it always as rehearsing with your grounds. For what grounds? What is grounding you in this rehearsal? Which tool? And allowing your favorite, the happy moments that you get from your own private rehearsal to carry into your rehearsal, so that as an actor, I want to come to rehearsal every single time with new creative impulses to reveal to my director. And the more you as an artist bring forward these creations to me as a director, the more freedom I can give you, and the less work I have to do to activate your freedom. I can become much more of a guide rather than a dictator, which is my preference. I know that in the Lithuanian, Latvian period of time when Michael Chekhov was teaching there in the early 1930s, before he sort of part of his transition from teaching in Russia, where he again was speaking in Russian, Gidis Patagimas, who's a scholar and Chekhov practitioner in over there, describes from the notes of Michael Chekhov there the process of the director interviewing the actor about their character. And out of that interview, the director listens, as I understood Giddies, the director listens and begins to do gestures reflecting what the actor is talking about. And in that way, the director, as the actor speaks, the director starts reflecting what the director is seeing in the gestures of the actor, and the actor sees what the director is reflecting and then can expand upon that. And that is very much like the process that Michael Chekhov himself used with Mala Powers, who was privately coached by him and who was the executor of Michael Chekhov's estate and a co-founder of NMCA. So, she shared how Michael Chekhov worked with her, and he would, and other actors, and he would do this. He would interview them, have them describe their character, and then he would help them notice the small gestures and the larger impulses, the qualities and the movements that they were expressing while they were describing the character in the third person, as Joerg was saying. So to maintain that sense of objective perspective from the higher ego, the creative artist, for the character. And so this is a really excellent technique that I use in helping my actors eventually develop their psychological gestures. And for me as an actor, I have, I love psychological gesture, but which tools, when I'm working on a play, which tools I begin working with at home on my own completely depend. It's a completely mutable system. It completely depends on what my creative individuality is bringing forward to me in that particular moment. And there may be times when I don't go through all the tools. There may be times I don't even do a psychological gesture, a super psychological gesture for the character. I just use gestures for particular moments. But I do, important for me, an important process for me is I do journal and keep track of my private rehearsals with the character, so that I have a page of my script and I have a blank page opposite it, and I put columns on my script, and I take the tools and I break them into basic concepts, gesture and objective, atmospheres, qualities and sensations, and characterization, where I will list things like, is my character predominantly thinking, feeling, or willing in this moment? Are they radiating or receiving in this moment? What is their imaginary body? Where is their center in that column? And are they pushing, lifting, smashing? What is their gesture here? And what is the atmosphere? So I make notes in those columns of what I experienced, and I might mark it if every time I rehearse this scene, I always feel best with atmosphere. Then I'm going to highlight that column of atmosphere, and when I come into rehearsal, that's what I'm going to bring in. But I've already worked, 5 maybe different ways, rehearse that section 5 different ways, 5 different grounds, and I've made my notes as to what is really working for me, and that's what I bring into my director. So those are some suggestions of individual processes.
Great. Lisa, that's just what the Chekhov technique is provoking to the creative artist, and giving the tools, I think, I call that self-directing, how one can, with the help of the tools you have in your body or around your body, in your artistic body, you can direct yourself and always be a little bit, it's so difficult to explain, but always you are aware of that, what you just are trying out. So, and it is a very subtle, nice thing. I say, oh, okay, I try that, and one try it out, and one has a feeling how it works or how it not is working. And out of that, one can direct oneself and can do really a very far-going self-rehearsal process. And I found, with the help of the Chekhov tools, this is interesting, what I have rehearsed, so that lets me free. I'm free with it. I can do it in this way, but I can also change it. When I get another input or another direction, oh yeah, I can change it, because I know, more or less, I know always is a kind of a just cloudy inspiration process also with it. I mostly know what I have done, and so it's easy for me to easier to try something different. I'm not struggling so much because I'm always in relationship to the character and me as actor. The same, at least, also as director. As director, I have three relationships in this way. I have the relationship to the characters, and I have the relationship to the actors. So as director, there is another deep point also in this process that you can call that the social process, or so that you can create the higher, not you create it, but that it can incarnate a little bit the higher ego of the ensemble in the end. What is then the really good performance if that happens from the ensemble. Yeah, so the director is also responsible then for that, how it is between the actors also. So yeah, that's I think a very important point with a self-directing of the actor, especially also for the later rehearsal processes in step 3 and step 4. And there is that point I would like to take. I find it very, very helpful also. Sometimes I bring the actors together and say, speak to your colleague about your character and get some questions from your colleague. What he understood about your character, and please answer that question to him, to her. And this is a really inspiring process for the actor who has a character and had always some imaginations and something, because that goes then deeper, and there is coming in a lot of inspiration through that process. And then they can do it reverse, or you can circle it very playfully. That's a main process also for that third step.
So we're looking for always the fourth step, the inspiration. And do you encourage the actors as directors? Do you encourage your actors to go with the tools to the stage, to the performance? Or how do you see the performance? Is it just a stream of inspiration, or they continue to work on the tools all the time, also in the process of the play itself, or the stage, the performance?
I actually am gonna come both from the director and from the actor perspective. When I have as an actor what I call a score of tools, I actually can rehearse just before. My warm-up is going from the last tools, my favorites for those sections. Mr. Chekhov says, you know, try to select as few as possible. But I actually can psychophysically do the entire score of my tools in reverse, from the last tool all the way back to before I walk on the stage, and then go on the stage. And if I am living in the state of inspiration, then I just flow in the moment to moment process. But if I am not quite there, then I know exactly which tool I can actively do right there on the stage in the performance to get me back into the flow where I want to go. So the glory of Michael Chekhov's technique is that it unifies through your concentration on your imagination, which brings you in an outward flow into contact with space and partner, so that the tools never take you into any place but the present moment. all tools bring you into the present moment. Even something like focal points, where your character is going into a state of memory, you, the artist, are in the present moment expressing the character who's having a moment in their past, or a moment fantasizing of their future. But you, the artist, are always in that present moment. So as a director, if I know where my actors' vulnerable spots are, where they tend to slide off the track with the story and with their character, then I will try to help them identify a favorite tool particularly for those sections. Of course, I recommend they all have a score that they can use, but that may not be their process. But if I can see a consistent vulnerability for them, then I will recommend how they can make it through those particular places with a specific set of tools, and hopefully maybe at least three different possible tools, so that each performance they could try a different tool in that section to keep it alive and keep exploring it. And Yul Brynner wants me to remind you that for him, he did The King and I over 5,000 times on stage, and he would just go around the chart and pick a different Chekhov tool each night to be his grounds for that performance, to keep it fresh. So that's another way of using tools literally in performance. The goal is to get to the center point where there's no grounds, there's no tools. The state of inspiration carries you, your intuition is flowing through everything. So that's the goal. But the glory of the technique is, if you're not there, you have a way to get there.
Lisa, you said it. And it is, of course, when we speak here that now in this hour, just touching, I'm a little bit afraid, just touching. So few little points only, and there is so much more what happens in this process. But when you ask for that performance, I say forget everything. And this has to do also in the rehearsal process, to learn and to study the conscious forgetting. That I learn consciously to forget what I have done, to do something else. And this trains also to trust the inspiration, or the living in the moment of now, or how you call it, in so many words and terms for it. And this is quite clear. In case that you feel a little bit dry in the performance or not so inspired, then it's very helpful that one has worked this, what one wants to express through the tools. And in the rehearsal process, it's anyway that it is only one tool at a time, working only with one tool at a time. And this makes also the rehearsal process very interesting. It can't get dry. Even when you repeat something from the words and from the actions, when you have in different situations, different tools for that same frame of scene or for the same scene, you rehearse it from different point of views. And all that goes into that, how to call it, I call that into that, let's say, into the imaginary performance. It is going in this body, imaginary body of the performance, or the living body of the performance. And in the performance itself, one is entering the space by crossing the threshold. And then everything is there. So there is, to prepare that, I like to very much to put in in a very late situation, a kind of rehearsal that I am reading the text and the actors are sitting in front of the stage. And they have to look to the stage, watching the stage, and to imagine all what happens there. And then, and this you can try it out, it's really fantastic. When you then cross the threshold with this understanding that everything is already there, everything is there, then you step in and you feel immediately, you sense it, everything is coming to you. And in this, why is it an imaginary performance in this way? Because in the imagination, everything is there, everything what is on our physical world in a timeline, in the imagination, everything is there at the same time. And this is an interesting thing. What suggest is building for the performance just this sphere, this field of the, in this way, let's say, imaginary world, or the world of imagination, the real world of imagination, that then the full play is there when you enter the stage. And this is leading you then. So that's, yeah, maybe in addition to that, what Lisa said, that's quite clear. So
I love that, Joerg. There's a process that I have done, and and now I'm interested in how these would combine, that I use very late in the process, very close to performance, often in the midst of the technical immersion when perhaps the theater isn't even available. I have all the actors lie down with their heads together in a circle or as close as they can, and close their eyes, and they speak very softly the play. They go through the play. They all do their own lines, visualizing everything in the play, and I just love your idea so much now. I might adopt that over this process, but this process also, I can imagine both of them serve to, in addition to what you were saying about creating the imaginary body of the play as it's already there, really experiencing it from an objective and audience perspective, that it's a calming process, that it's a process that goes to diffuse a great deal of inhibition and tension that is building up to the opening of the production. So in addition to taking these moments where you kind of put the brakes on the cast, you stop them and contain them and release from them the need to engage in all this physical activity and allow them to go very fully into their imagination. It causes a sense of calm and gets them out of their own issues and concerns. And that leads me to another preparation for inspiration that I like to use, is to have a special event, a special something incredibly fun, incredibly crazy. Do a rehearsal with, play each other's characters, do it high speed, do it in completely the wrong style, just take a whole bunch of any kind of random things and just do it really badly, really wrong, really silly, fun, outlandish, any way that you can think of, to also help build the field of ensemble, to help transform any tensions that are present and help lift the process out so that it can you can help diffuse crises. So I just want to speak for a moment about the concept of crisis and its relationship to inspiration. And we know this in almost all productions have this big crisis 3/4 of the way through the rehearsal process. Everyone gets into a big fight, everyone cries, screams, somebody breaks their leg, you know, something happens and the show shuts down, whatever, the lights fall down from the ceiling, crazy things. Cast members get into arguments, all sorts of nonsense happens. And it's like every single time we rehearse, this happens. And from a psychological perspective, the crisis is seen as an opportunity for everyone to have a common enemy, you could say. From the outside, it becomes a force of conflict from the outside that threatens the very life of the production and causes everyone in the production to have to go beyond their lower ego to a higher common point to save the show. And when they go deeper or pull far enough away and reach to sources beyond their lower ego fears and concerns, they find a larger field of inspiration and creativity. And when we understand this, and I talk about this with my casts again in the very beginning of the rehearsal process, when we know this is coming, we can start to identify the seeds that are starting to become weeds and starting to poison the production. And we can start identifying it, not judging it, but saying, look, there's a weed that's going to turn into poison for us. How can we deal with that? Let's look at the beauty of that. And we can work toward finding the beauty of the crises. And when we choose to find the beauty in the smaller crises, we do not have to we do not have to have the whole production threatened in order to achieve this state of inspiration. We actually can spring higher, spring more fully, and create a more powerful production than through this old-fashioned, we need a crisis to pull us together technique. So little special moments, gifts, what we do in NMCA, the angel walk, a special gathering to reinforce, radiate this love to each other. This act of what Joerg said, revisiting the things you fell in love with and sharing that with everyone. Any techniques that can go to diffuse this. And that's also why I do the reversal, starting with the most challenging stuff first, because when the technology is coming in, we are no longer trying to block the final climactic scene. We're no longer trying to block the rehearsal, the bows and the curtain call. Though all the main points are already in place, and what we're doing now is refining. And so when the sets come in, we make friends with them, we make friends with the technology, and we embrace, especially if we've been engaging all of our cast and crew in our warm-ups and in our creative process, we will already feel the ensemble with the props and the ensemble with the sets and the designs and the costumes, because we've been in touch with those who have created them. So that's another thing. A lot of times we are not in touch with the staff and the design team. So when they bring us something, we are less open to transferring our fantasy of what it would be with the reality. And by having this collaboration early on and throughout, we're able to receive their inspiration more fully.
Yeah, I like very much this point you said, to in a later state when the rehearsals are very close to the performance, just to jump into another style or to change it, break everything with a full run through. I like it very much. And I think it's also so freeing for everybody, so that one afterwards sends what one has worked out much more in detail. And that's very enjoyable. I like it. I'm very happy about this moment when it comes to that point. And another thing is, of course, what I as director have experienced, just what you said, there is always a coming crisis, a kind of crisis. And I found out for myself, I don't know how you sensed it, and so I feel by this, what I found out, very much prepared to face these moments. Not that I want to provoke them or that I wish that they come, no, but they come by themselves. And I found out that this theme of the play, the conflicts of the play, this happens between the members of the ensemble on their, let's say, daily life beings.
Yes, they absolutely do. It's
Yeah.
remarkable.
This is what happens there. And when you direct a play, then you know it will come. And then you see, even in some ensemble situations or in the rehearsal process sometimes, you see some lights of that sometimes coming up. And okay, and one can try to handle it, and that's very good to try to handle it, to speak about that or find that in a way to create a social peace in this way, or strengthen the ensemble feeling itself. But this is very, very interesting and very important. And when it happens, then everybody can know, let's look to the play. What are we rehearsing here? And isn't it interesting that this conflict or this theme of the play has such a power that it can even touch us here, who are trying just to make it transparent for the audience and to show that something is beyond what can overcome that problems. So that's a very important point for the directing part of you. And this happens in the field between 3 and 4, step 3 and 4, it's in the field. You can't say when it happens. Sometimes I heard it. I heard it.
Yes.
Really, in the last rehearsals, short before the first performance should happen, then it came, and then it came. So, bah, heaven. So but it's great. It's part of this creative process. It's never fight against the actors. It's just that what the play is also gives us a real experience of that. What is in it?
Well, it is, that condition of the ensemble crisis reflecting the play, the crises in the play happened so many times, even in the NMCA intensives, where we focus on one particular play. And at one point, Mala and Will and I sat down and said, we're not going to do traumatic dramas like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. we had all the challenges of the play among the class. And so we were like, you know what, from now on, we're doing comedies.
Because we speak about that third and fourth step. And this is really, as I found, a very practical suggestion from Michael Chekhov. Not in this way, when we express it in a negative way, not to rehearse from the beginning to the end, just rehearse in this way unlogically. And there are different possibilities to rehearse unlogically. In this way, logically, I mean, would be I start with the first scene and go to the second, go to the third, and then I end with the last. Just start with two ways. You can, if you not have another idea, you can simply start just with the last moments, last scene, and then go to the beginning and then find what is the main conflict scene between or moments of between. Or you have some scene and you start with the end and then you go to the main turning point in the scene and so on, but not rehearsing from the first word to the last word. Just bring always the things in relation to each other. And the end to the beginning, the middle to the beginning, the middle to the end. How is this transforming? And explore between that another transformation. That is very important. Chekhov suggests that for the rehearsal process. And this gives also for the actor a great freedom. What do you feel? What would you like? What is it what you feel now, what you would like to rehearse? Or what is clear for you, or what is absolutely not clear for you? And let's start with that we can explore it. And out of that, it can grow and grow. In this way, from the other side, it is, as Chekhov suggested, this rehearsal process. It is really starting from the sphere and bringing it step by step down and here, and not start just with it. I have to act it right now, and I have to know how it is going in the right direction now. So it's really an inviting process, a process of inviting the higher ego, the creative ego, inviting the creative power of the art to that what we are doing here in our physical relationship as actors and directors.
When I look at our fourth stage of inspiration, we can say that it cannot be commanded, but that we can prepare a field for it. And this process of looking into where am I going to begin my rehearsal, or what will I focus on today? One pathway that I go to is, if I don't have something laid out for me, I'm going to go to the area where I am most uncomfortable, where I feel least secure, that I understand the least, and I will go into that part and work to become comfortable with the hardest part for me. And that way, I don't build up any sort of anxiety when I'm approaching it in rehearsal or in performance. And I think of it like if I were constructing a freeway, and I would build the biggest, most complicated section first, the bridges that all cross over each other. I wouldn't focus on the entrances and the exits to the freeway. I build the most complicated part first and make sure that I get that part. And then if I run out of time, I know that I'll find my way onto the ramp there. And so I really love the idea of being able to move to any particular part of the technique at any particular time to approach the most challenging parts. And when I have cultivated a field through the actual labor of practice rehearsal, then I can really let go of the specificity and the tight control and put myself into a field of inspiration, much more likely so. So as for my wrapping up, and then I'll turn it over to Joerg to close up, I want to just look back for a moment on these four aspects of the creative process in relation to the forces of thinking, feeling, and willing as our the essence of our psyche, our soul, as an artist. That first phase of falling in love, where we're reading the script and we're discovering it has a great deal for me to do with our thinking processes, to get my thinking processes to fall in love with this process, with this play, with this story, with this group. And when I get that thinking process activated and clear, I have excitement and interest and curiosity living. The more love I develop, and that love then leads me into the feeling process of imagination, where I start to really get a feel for the soul of the play and the story. And then I must engage my will force. That's what I see the rehearsal process as. It's the process where we put everything into action. And so the stage number one, activating the thinking forces. Stage number two, engaging the entire ensemble and myself in fostering the field of the imagination, the feeling forces of the play, and then bringing the will force, the physical body of the play into expression. And then the incorporation, of course, the inspiration, of course, is when we see the entire mise en scène, where the thinking forces of our falling in love are manifesting in the feelings and atmospheres and dynamics, and the physical expression of the play being received by the audience. So always holding this image of what for do we do it, and it's for the audience, for whatever purpose that is. That having an inspiring what for will be a guiding angel over the production throughout the entire creative process.
That's very, very important to see that relationship also, yeah, in this direction. And that's very nice. Thank you. You can also think about for yourself, maybe, or we have it in the next session. You can also very nicely relate that to the four elements, the four stages of the creative process. When we not are looking to the elements as we have them as on the physical, in the physical meaning, the earth, the water, the air, and the fire. And the earthy process, of course, is the first reading and the first connecting with it, and so forth. And the fourth element of fire, this is the intuition, this is the inspired performance. There is fire or glow, or there is warmth, there is that element in it. And it helps sometimes to know to direct a process, because sometimes one feels after 1 week, oh, we have done so much, but we are not a step further. We have nothing on stage here. In this way, it's not clear how it really goes. And it needs a big trust that one knows, yeah, in the end, it will be there. We trust it because we are working and we build it and we know how it goes through some stages, how it goes through thinking, feeling, willing, and how it goes through the 4 elements to become a full world. The 4 elements, this is our world. And then we create that on stage, the artistic world of the play.
So we shall wrap this up, and our next topic is going to be how to apply the creative process to the audition.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everybody, and see you hopefully next Monday.